The bikini strap snapped with a sound Donnie Davis would replay in his mind for days afterward, a soft pop that somehow cut through the crash of waves and the distant laughter of resort guests. Betty Briones stumbled in the surf, her hands instinctively crossing over her chest as the turquoise water swirled around her waist. Donnie reacted without thinking. 3 strides through the current, his hands steadying her shoulders before his brain could remind him that this was his CEO, that touching her could cost him everything. She looked up into his face, water droplets clinging to her lashes, her expression caught between surprise and something else, something vulnerable and defiant all at once. "Don't look away," she whispered. And he didn't. In that crystallized moment, the billion-dollar empire dissolved. The quarterly earnings reports, the strategic 5-year plan, the carefully maintained professional distance, all of it vanished into the salt air. What remained was simply a woman and a man, stripped of titles, standing in the honest light of day while the ocean churned around them and 8-year-old Sophia built sandcastles 50 yards down the beach, blissfully unaware that her father's world had just shifted on its axis. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this story, please hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're reading from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. The email had arrived on a Wednesday, which Donnie Davis would later recognize as the first crack in his carefully constructed fortress of routine. Mariposa Summit Invitation, Exec Tier Access, 4 days, family welcome. He'd read it 3 times at his cramped desk in the analytics department, surrounded by dual monitors displaying endless spreadsheets and the faint hum of fluorescent lights, while Sophia practiced her multiplication tables at the folding chair he'd wedged beside his filing cabinet. 8 years old and already accustomed to spending afternoons in her father's workplace, she'd looked up with those impossibly bright eyes when he'd mentioned the beach. "Can we go, Daddy? I've never seen the ocean." And because Donnie had learned long ago that he couldn't deny his daughter much of anything, not after her mother had disappeared when Sophia was barely walking, leaving him to figure out single parenthood with nothing but desperation and determination, he'd said yes. Even though the thought of 4 days trapped among executives made his stomach turn. Even though he'd calculated the cost 3 times and knew his credit card would punish him for months. Even though mandatory attendance always meant something designed by people who'd never had to pack emergency snacks or explain why Daddy couldn't afford the school ski trip. Now, standing in the soaring lobby of the Mariposa Beach Resort with Sophia's small hand gripped firmly in his, a worn duffel bag slung over his shoulder, Donnie wondered if he'd made a catastrophic mistake. The lobby stretched upward like a cathedral, all polished marble and floor-to-ceiling windows designed to make ordinary people feel appropriately insignificant. Through the glass, the Pacific Ocean glittered sapphire and gold under the late April sun. Executives clustered in carefully casual groups, their laughter pitched for maximum networking effect, their resort wear effortlessly expensive. Donnie recognized faces from company directories, VPs, department heads, the kind of people whose decisions filtered down to his quarterly performance reviews like distant weather systems. "Daddy, it's so pretty," Sophia breathed, her voice filled with appropriate wonder. "It's just a hotel, sweetheart." But he straightened his shoulders anyway, acutely aware of his discount khakis and the button-down shirt he'd ironed twice that morning, trying to press confidence into the fabric. He'd packed his 2 decent dress shirts for the actual summit sessions, but experience had taught him not to waste ammunition on check-in. The registration desk was brisk and impersonal. "Room 412. Ocean view. Here's your welcome packet, meal vouchers, and summit schedule. Enjoy your stay, Mr. Davis." The clerk's gaze slid past him like he was wallpaper, which was fine. Donnie had perfected the art of invisibility over 3 years with Briones Enterprises, the kind of strategic camouflage that let him do excellent work without attracting dangerous attention. They just turned toward the elevators when the crowd shifted, parting with the unconscious deference people showed to money and power. Betty Briones walked through the lobby like gravity bent around her. Donnie had seen the CEO before, of course. Quarterly all-hands meetings where she spoke from a distant stage. Annual reports where her headshot radiated confidence and control. That one elevator ride where he'd pressed himself against the back wall and studied the floor numbers with laser focus while she'd taken a call about restructuring the European division. But he'd never seen her like this. She'd traded her signature power suits for white linen pants and a navy silk blouse that probably cost more than his monthly rent. Her blonde hair, usually pinned in that severe, "don't waste my time" style, fell in loose waves past her shoulders. Without the armor of corporate formality, she looked younger than her 40-something years. Almost human. Almost approachable. Almost. She moved with two members of her executive team, discussing something with the rapid-fire intensity Donnie recognized from the rare times he'd been pulled into executive briefings. Her expression revealed nothing except competence and command. Even in casual clothes, she radiated the kind of certainty that came from building a billion-dollar empire from a college dorm room and a laptop. Sophia tugged his hand. "Who's that lady?" "Nobody, sweetheart. Come on, let's find our room." But as they headed for the elevators, Donnie felt the weight of observation, that prickling awareness of being watched. He glanced back. Betty Briones had paused mid-conversation, her gaze fixed on him with an expression he couldn't decipher. Curiosity? Recognition? Something else entirely? Their eyes met across the lobby. She smiled, small, controlled, professional. He nodded awkwardly and practically shoved Sophia into the elevator. "That lady was pretty," Sophia announced as the doors closed. "Aha." Donnie stared at the floor numbers climbing, his heart doing something stupid and dangerous in his chest. He had no way of knowing that in less than 12 hours, that same woman would be standing waist-deep in the Pacific Ocean, a broken bikini strap in her hand and 3 words on her lips that would rewrite both their futures. "Don't look away." The email sat in Donnie's inbox for 47 minutes before he opened it, buried between a reminder about updating his password and a company-wide memo about the new break room coffee machine. He'd learned to let non-urgent messages marinate, a survival strategy for managing an 8-year-old, a full-time job, and the perpetual juggling act of single parenthood. When he finally clicked it open, he read the subject line 3 times, certain he'd misunderstood. Mariposa Summit Invitation, Executive Tier Access. His first thought was that someone had made a mistake. His second thought was how much trouble he'd be in if he ignored an email clearly meant for someone important. His third thought died halfway through when he saw his name spelled correctly in the salutation. "Dear Donnie Davis, you are cordially invited to attend the 2024 Mariposa Leadership Summit, April 18th to 21st, at the exclusive Mariposa Beach Resort." Donnie scrolled through the details with growing dread. 4 days. Mandatory attendance. Beachfront luxury accommodations. Strategic planning sessions with executive leadership. Family welcome, children encouraged. He pulled up the resort website. The homepage loaded with that smooth, expensive animation that screamed exclusivity. Mediterranean architecture. Infinity pools. Private beach access. Rooms starting at $400 per night. His stomach dropped. He opened his banking app and stared at the number that stared back, accusatory and insufficient. Round-trip flights for 2. For nights incidentals even if the room was covered. Meals outside the provided vouchers because Sophia was a picky eater who wouldn't touch fancy food. He'd need to take unpaid days since his vacation time was already allocated for Sophia's school breaks. The math was brutal. "Daddy, can I have more crackers?" Sophia sat at her folding chair beside his desk, coloring a rainbow with the intense concentration only 8-year-olds possessed. She'd already been through 2 juice boxes and was working on her 3rd pack of goldfish crackers. The after-school program had closed early for staff training, which meant she'd spend the afternoon here, in his gray cubicle, surrounded by spreadsheets and the low hum of office white noise. "Sure, baby." He pulled another pack from his desk drawer, he kept them stocked like ammunition. He should decline. Send a polite response about prior commitments. Let whoever made the database error fix it quietly. But Sophia looked up, catching something in his expression. What's wrong? Nothing. Just work stuff. Is it bad work stuff? He tried to smile. No, actually. They invited us to a beach trip. For work. Her eyes went impossibly wide. The ocean? The real ocean with waves? Well, yeah, but I've never seen the ocean. Can we go? Please, Daddy, please. She abandoned her crayons entirely, scrambling over to grip his arm with both hands. I'll be so good. I'll pack my own bag. I won't complain about anything. Donnie looked at his daughter, at the hope blazing in her face, at the way her whole body vibrated with possibility. They'd never taken a real vacation. Their trips consisted of the public pool in summer and that one disastrous camping attempt, where it had rained for 3 days straight. She'd never seen the ocean. He thought about his ex-wife, who'd walked out claiming she couldn't handle the suffocation of family life. He thought about the college scholarship he'd turned down to keep his job when Sophia was born. He thought about all the small sacrifices that had become his daily currency. Maybe Sophia deserved one impractical, yet beautiful, financially irresponsible thing. Okay, he heard himself say. We'll go. Her shriek of joy made his coworker 2 cubicles over drop his coffee mug. 3 weeks later, standing in the Mariposa Resort lobby in his twice-ironed khakis while executives in Hermes scarves discussed their Aspen timeshares, Donnie wondered what the hell he'd been thinking. Sophia squeezed his hand, her eyes huge as she took in the marble columns and crystal chandeliers. He didn't belong here. But Sophia deserved the ocean. So he'd make it work. He always did. Donnie woke at 5:30 out of pure habit, his internal alarm clock refusing to acknowledge they were on vacation. Sophia sprawled across 3/4 of the hotel bed, one arm flung over her face, her stuffed rabbit clutched against her chest. He'd let her stay up too late watching the sunset from their balcony, her running commentary about the giant orange ball melting into the ocean worth every minute of lost sleep. He made coffee with the in-room machine, terrible, but caffeinated, and watched the sky turn from charcoal to pearl gray. The beach below was empty, pristine, untouched by the chaos that would arrive once the executives started their networking brunches and strategic planning sessions. Daddy? Sophia's sleepy voice drifted from the bed. Is it beach time? It's 5:30, baby. Go back to sleep. But I want to find seashells before everyone else takes them. 15 minutes later, they were walking barefoot across the still cool sand of the night, Sophia racing ahead in her favorite purple swimsuit, while Donnie carried towels, sunscreen, and the ever-present emergency backpack. The ocean stretched infinitely in gray-blue, the morning light turning the waves to liquid silver. Sophia squealed at every shell, every piece of sea glass, every treasure the tide had deposited. Donnie followed, documenting her joy with his phone, trying to capture proof that they belonged in moments like this. That's when he saw her. A woman stood alone at the water's edge, waves lapping at her ankles, her posture somehow both relaxed and lonely. She wore a simple white cover-up over a black swimsuit, her blonde hair caught in a loose braid. Even from 50 yards away, even without the corporate armor, Donnie recognized her. Betty Briones. His CEO. Standing in the surf at dawn like she was just another human being seeking solitude. He should turn around. Grab Sophia and head back before. Daddy, look. Sophia was already running toward the water, toward the woman, waving a sand dollar like a trophy. It's perfect. No cracks. Donnie's heart stopped. Sophia, wait. But his daughter had no concept of corporate hierarchy or appropriate boundaries. She splashed into the shallows, heading straight for Betty Briones with the fearless enthusiasm only children possessed. Betty turned, and Donnie watched her expression shift, surprise, then something softer as Sophia held up her prize. "Look what I found. It's not broken." Donnie caught up, breathless, ready to apologize. But Betty had already crouched down to Sophia's level, examining the sand dollar with genuine interest. "That's a beautiful specimen," Betty said, her voice warmer than Donnie had ever heard it. "Do you know they're actually alive when they're in the ocean? They only turn white after they wash up." "Really?" Sophia's eyes went wide. "So this one was swimming?" "Not exactly swimming. More like crawling along the bottom, looking for food." Donnie stood frozen, watching his boss explain marine biology to his daughter with the patience of someone who actually enjoyed children. This wasn't the woman who'd restructured 3 divisions in a quarterly meeting. This was someone else entirely, someone human and present. Betty glanced up, and their eyes met. Recognition flickered across her face. "Donnie Davis." She said his name like she'd been expecting him. "Strategic Analytics." He blinked. "You know my name. I read the quarterly reports. Your risk assessment model for the expansion saved us from a significant mistake last year." She stood, brushing sand from her knees. "I should have sent you a personal thank you. Consider this my belated acknowledgement." That's not necessary, Ms. Briones." "Betty." She smiled, and it transformed her face completely. "We're on a beach at dawn. I think we can dispense with formalities." "Betty," he repeated, the name foreign and dangerous on his tongue. Sophia, oblivious to the seismic shift happening above her head, tugged Betty's hand. "Do you want to help us find more shells?" Betty looked at Donnie, something questioning in her expression. He should say no. Should manufacture an excuse about breakfast or unpacking. Instead, he found himself nodding. "We'd love the company," he heard himself say. And Betty Briones smiled as he'd just given her something precious. The welcome reception occupied the resort's oceanfront terrace, all white linen and strategically placed heat lamps as the sun melted into the Pacific. Donnie had changed into his better button-down, the navy one without any stains, and spent 20 minutes negotiating with Sophia about appropriate reception behavior. "I know it's boring, baby, but it's only an hour. Then we'll get pizza and watch that mermaid movie. Can I bring my coloring book?" "Yes. But quiet coloring. And if anyone important is talking, you have to be invisible like a ninja." "I know, Daddy." Now she sat at a high-top table near the edge of the terrace, working on an elaborate underwater scene while Donnie nursed a beer he didn't want and tried to look professionally engaged. The executives clustered in their natural formations, finance with finance, operations with operations, everyone sizing up everyone else while pretending to admire the view. Donnie had positioned himself near the marketing VPs, close enough to seem participatory but far enough to avoid direct conversation. Strategic invisibility, perfected over 3 years. Then Marcus Caldwell from legal noticed him. "Davis, right? Analytics?" Marcus had the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. "Surprised to see you here. Thought this was executive tier only." "Database error, probably," Donnie said lightly, taking a long pull from his beer. "Ah. Well. Enjoy it while it lasts." The implication hung in the air like smoke. Donnie felt the familiar tightening in his chest, the reminder that he was tolerated here, not welcomed. That his presence was an administrative accident, easily corrected. "I think the database worked exactly as intended." The voice cut through the conversation like a blade wrapped in silk. Betty Briones materialized at Donnie's elbow, holding a glass of white wine and wearing a cream dress that probably cost more than his car. She transformed again, no longer the beach morning version who'd crouched in the sand with Sophia, but not quite the corporate warrior either. Something in between. Something deliberate. Marcus straightened immediately. Ms. Briones. We were just discussing database errors. Her smile was pleasant and sharp. Donnie, I've been meaning to ask you about the methodology you used in last quarter's supply chain analysis. Do you have a minute? It wasn't really a question. Of course, Donnie managed, his heart doing something complicated. She steered him away from Marcus's group with the efficiency of someone who'd navigated 1,000 cocktail parties. They ended up near the terrace railing, the ocean spreading dark and infinite below them. You didn't have to do that, Donnie said quietly. Do what? Ask about your work. I'm genuinely interested. She sipped her wine, her gaze focused on him with an intensity that made his skin warm. Your predictive model was elegant. Most people overcomplicate the variables. You stripped it down to what actually mattered. He blinked. She'd actually read his work. Not just skimmed the executive summary, but understood the methodology. Thank you. That means a lot coming from you. Does it? Something flickered in her expression. Or does it just seem surreal that I notice what happens below the C-suite? Before he could answer, Sophia appeared at his side, tugging his sleeve. Daddy, I'm tired. Can we go soon? Betty looked down at Sophia, and her expression softened completely. Long day of shell hunting. So long. We found 17 perfect ones. Sophia held up her fingers to demonstrate the magnitude. That's impressive work. Betty crouched down again, that same genuine warmth from the morning returning. Are you building a collection? A museum? In our room. With labels and everything. A curator already. Your dad must be proud. He is, Sophia said with absolute certainty, then yawned hugely. Donnie checked his watch. 7:30. I should get her to bed. Early morning tomorrow. Of course. Betty stood, but caught his arm lightly before he could leave. Donnie. The family accommodations, bringing children to company events. That was my initiative. 3 years ago. He stared at her. I saw too many talented people declining opportunities because they couldn't arrange childcare or afford separate family trips. It seemed. She paused, choosing her words carefully. Unnecessarily cruel. To make people choose between career advancement and their children. Something shifted in Donnie's chest. This wasn't performative corporate responsibility. This was someone who'd thought about people like him, who'd changed policy because it mattered. Thank you, he said, meaning it completely. That policy, it's the only reason we're here. Betty smiled, and for just a moment, with the ocean wind catching her hair and the string lights glowing soft around them, she looked almost vulnerable. I'm glad you came, she said quietly. Then she was gone, pulled back into the executive constellation, leaving Donnie standing at the railing with his half-asleep daughter and a dangerous warmth spreading through his chest. The ocean was glass smooth at 6 a.m., the kind of perfect stillness that wouldn't last past breakfast. Sophia bounced on her toes at the water's edge, her purple floaties already inflated, her excitement barely contained. Cold, 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 she shrieked as the first wave hit her ankles. That's why we go slow, baby. Donnie waded in beside her, the shock of cold water stealing his breath. But Sophia was fearless, splashing forward until the water reached her waist, then launching herself into his arms with complete trust that he'd catch her. They floated together beyond the gentle shore break, Sophia practicing her kicks while Donnie supported her back, both of them squinting against the rising sun. This was worth every dollar on his credit card, this moment of his daughter laughing in the ocean, her joy so pure it hurt to witness. Can we swim to that buoy? That's pretty far, sweetheart. But you'll be with me. Before he could answer, he heard the clean slice of someone swimming with real skill. He turned, shading his eyes, and felt his stomach drop. Betty Briones cut through the water with efficient strokes, heading toward the outer break where the waves began their long roll toward shore. She wore a simple black bikini, her body lean and strong, her hair slicked back from her face. Without the armor of clothing or makeup or corporate polish, she looked stripped down to something essential. She hadn't seen them yet. "Daddy, is that the shell lady?" "Yeah," Donnie managed. "We should probably." But Betty had spotted them. She changed direction, swimming over with easy confidence, then standing when the water was chest deep. Her smile was genuine, unguarded in a way he'd never seen in any boardroom. "Good morning, Sophia. Ready for your swimming lesson?" Sophia's eyes went huge. "You know how to teach swimming?" "I was a lifeguard in college." "Come on, I'll show you how to float on your back." For the next 20 minutes, Donnie watched his CEO teach his daughter to starfish float, her patience infinite, her laughter real. Sophia glowed under the attention, showing off every skill, desperate to impress this elegant woman who treated her like she mattered. They drifted further out, into deeper water where the swells lifted them gently. Betty was demonstrating how to dive under a wave when it happened. The swell was bigger than the others, catching them all off guard. Betty dove through it, but something went wrong. She surfaced sputtering, one hand pressed to her chest, her expression flickering between surprise and something sharper. Her bikini strap had snapped. Donnie saw it in the split second before she registered what happened, the broken string floating on the surface, her top sliding dangerously low. Every instinct screamed at him to look away, to give her privacy, to pretend he hadn't noticed. But she caught his gaze before he could turn. Time crystallized. The morning sun, the salt water, his daughter practicing her kicks 10 feet away, oblivious. Betty treading water, vulnerable and exposed, watching him with an expression he couldn't read. She could have panicked. Could have twisted away, demanded he turn around, reinforced every wall between CEO and employee. Instead, she held his gaze. "Don't look away," she said quietly. So he didn't. He swam closer, positioning himself between her and the shore, blocking any potential view while she adjusted the broken strap as best she could. Their faces were inches apart, close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her green eyes, close enough to feel her breath. "Thank you," she whispered. "Anyone would have." "No." Her voice was firm. "They wouldn't have. They would have looked away and pretended it didn't happen and made it about their own discomfort." She smiled, small and genuine. "You just helped." Something shifted between them in that moment. Something impossible and dangerous and utterly inevitable. "Daddy. Betty. Did you see my underwater handstand?" The spell broke. They separated, laughing at Sophia's enthusiasm, swimming back to shallower water. But Donnie felt it humming under his skin, the knowledge that whatever line they'd been walking, they'd just crossed it. Later, at the resort breakfast buffet, Betty sat with them like it was the most natural thing in the world. She stole bites of Sophia's pancakes, told stories about terrible college swimming meets, and laughed with her whole face when Sophia demonstrated her interpretation of a dolphin. And Donnie felt something he hadn't allowed himself in years. Hope. Dangerous, impractical, completely inadvisable hope. The afternoon sun blazed white-hot against the sand, but Sophia refused to go inside. She'd discovered her life's calling, architectural engineering via sandcastle construction. Betty had made the mistake of mentioning medieval fortifications during lunch, and now Sophia was determined to build something with real defense systems. "We need a moat," Sophia announced, hands on her hips like a tiny foreman. "A deep one. So the enemies drown." "Dark," Betty observed, amused. She'd changed into denim shorts and a loose linen shirt, her hair tied back with what looked like a hotel hair tie. Every trace of the CEO had evaporated. But strategically sound. Donnie dug the moat while Sophia and Betty worked on the tower system, their heads bent together over the engineering challenge of wet sand architecture. Other resort guests passed by, executives he vaguely recognized, but Betty didn't seem to notice or care. She was completely absorbed, debating wall thickness and structural integrity with an 8-year-old like it was a board meeting. "Your daughter's brilliant," Betty said when Sophia ran off to collect shells for decoration. "She is. Scary smart." Donnie smoothed the moat walls, watching his daughter skip along the tide line. "Gets it from her mother, probably. You don't talk about her much." Sophia's mother. He hadn't meant to open that door. But something about the afternoon heat and the rhythmic crash of waves made honesty feel safer than deflection. "Not much to say. She left when Sophia was 2. Said motherhood was suffocating her, that she needed to find herself." He laughed without humor. "Haven't heard from her since. No birthday cards, no child support, nothing. Just, gone." Betty's hands stilled in the sand. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. We're better off." He glanced at her. "I dropped out of my MBA program that semester. Took the analyst job because it had good benefits and stable hours. Gave up the whole strategic leadership track. That's why you're overqualified for your position." It wasn't a question. Donnie shrugged, uncomfortable with her perception. "I made a choice. Sophia needed stability more than I needed ambition. That's not a small sacrifice. It's not a sacrifice when it's for your kid." Betty was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing patterns in the wet sand. When she spoke, her voice was softer than he'd ever heard it. "I was engaged once. 28 years old, 5 years into building the company. He gave me an ultimatum, scale back or he'd leave." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I chose the company. Told myself I'd find balance later, that success would make space for relationships eventually." Did it? No. The word was flat, honest. It just made the space bigger. Emptier. She looked at him then, really looked at him. "I work 16-hour days. I have 700 employees who depend on me. I've built something meaningful from nothing. But I come back to a penthouse that echoes. I eat takeout alone at my desk. I can't remember the last time someone touched me without wanting something." Her laugh was sharp. "Yesterday morning, when Sophia grabbed my hand on the beach, I almost cried. Because it was just affection. No agenda." Donnie's chest ached. "Betty. I'm not fishing for sympathy. I made my choices consciously. But watching you with Sophia." She gestured at his daughter, now returning with an armful of shells. "You chose love over ambition. I chose ambition over love. And I'm starting to think you got the better deal. You built an empire. Empires are cold, Donnie." She met his eyes, and the vulnerability there stole his breath. "They don't laugh at your jokes or hold your hand or make you feel like you matter for reasons that have nothing to do with your bank account." Sophia crashed into their moment, dumping shells between them. "I found perfect ones. And a starfish. But it was dead, so I left it." "Good call," Betty said, her mask sliding back into place. "But not completely. Something remained open between them now, a door neither could fully close." They spent another hour finishing the castle, building turrets and bridges and an elaborate flag system. When Sophia finally declared it complete, Betty pulled out her phone and took approximately 50 photos from every angle. "For posterity," she explained. But Donnie saw her pause on one image, the 3 of them kneeling around their creation, Sophia beaming between 2 adults who looked almost like a family. Betty caught him watching. Neither of them looked away. Donnie's phone lit up at 11:17, pulling him from the edge of sleep. Sophia was sprawled across most of the bed, her hand curled around his wrist the way she'd done since she was a toddler. He carefully extracted himself and checked the message. Betty, can't sleep. Beach? He stared at the screen for 30 seconds, his thumb hovering over the keyboard. Every rational part of his brain screamed danger. His CEO. Past midnight. Alone on a beach. Donnie, give me 5 minutes. He scribbled a note for Sophia in case she woke, went for a walk, be right back, and grabbed his room key. The elevator ride down felt like descending into something he couldn't take back. She was waiting at the beach access stairs, barefoot in running shorts and an oversized sweatshirt that made her look younger, smaller. The moon hung fat and silver over the ocean, turning the waves to liquid mercury. Couldn't sleep, he asked quietly. Didn't want to. She started walking, and he fell into step beside her. I sleep 6 hours a night maximum. It feels wasteful here, with the ocean right there. They walked in silence for a while, the only sounds the rhythmic crash of waves and the distant thrum of the resort bar. When they were far enough from the lights, Betty stopped and sat in the sand. Donnie joined her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. When I was 10, Betty said suddenly, I wanted to be a marine biologist. I had this elaborate plan, study at Scripps, work on a research vessel, spend my life in the ocean. She laughed softly. My father told me there was no money in it. That I was too smart to waste my life on starfish. So you built a tech empire instead. So I proved I was smart enough for him to respect. She drew her knees up, wrapping her arms around them. Funny how we spend our whole lives trying to earn approval from people who were wrong about what mattered. Donnie thought about his own father, who'd died before Sophia was born. Who'd never said he was proud, never acknowledged that choosing family over career was its own kind of courage. What's your greatest fear? Betty asked, her voice barely audible over the waves. The question hung between them, intimate and dangerous. That I'm not enough, Donnie admitted. That Sophia will grow up and realize I gave up my dreams for her, and she'll feel guilty for existing. That she'll see me as the guy who settled instead of the guy who chose love. Betty turned to look at him, her eyes dark and serious in the moonlight. She'll never think that. Because you show her every single day that she's worth more than any dream. Her voice cracked slightly. My greatest fear is that I'll die alone in that penthouse. That I've built this massive company and at the end, there won't be anyone who cares about me, just about what I've accomplished. Betty. Everyone wants something from me, Donnie. She said it flatly, like stating a fact. Board members want profits. Employees want stability. Investors want growth. Even my own mother calls to ask about stock options. She met his eyes. Except you. You just see me. The person. Not the portfolio. His heart was doing something dangerous in his chest. I see you. I know. She smiled, sad and genuine. That's terrifying. They sat in silence, watching the waves roll in with hypnotic rhythm. The space between them felt charged, electric, impossible to ignore. This is a terrible idea, Betty said quietly. You work for my company. There are policies. Power dynamics. 1,000 reasons this can't happen. I know. I could ruin your career. Make things impossibly complicated. I know that too. She turned to face him fully. So why does it feel inevitable? Donnie held her gaze, seeing everything she was trying to say without words. The loneliness. The longing. The desperate hope that maybe, impossibly, they could be people instead of positions. Because some things matter more than complicated, he said. Betty reached for his hand in the darkness, her fingers threading through his. They didn't kiss. Didn't make promises they couldn't keep. Just sat together on the beach while the ocean whispered its ancient secrets and the world narrowed to this, two people choosing to be seen. I came to this summit hoping to remember why I built the company, Betty confessed. But I think I'm remembering what I built it instead of. Donnie squeezed her hand. It's not too late. Isn't it? No. He said it with conviction he didn't entirely feel. It's never too late to choose differently. She leaned her head against his shoulder, and they watched the waves until the moon shifted and the tide changed, and neither of them could pretend this was just friendship anymore. The morning strategy session felt like torture. Donnie sat in the back of the conference hall with the other mid-level attendees, watching Betty command the stage 200 feet away. She wore a charcoal suit that screamed power, her hair swept back in that severe style, every inch the billionaire CEO. But he'd seen her barefoot in the moonlight. Had felt her hand in his, her vulnerability laid bare. The distance between them felt like a canyon. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Betty, I can't stop thinking about last night. His heart stuttered. Around him, people took notes on quarterly projections. Someone asked a question about market penetration. The world continued like nothing had shifted. Betty, this is dangerous. He knew what she was really saying. We should stop. Before this becomes something we can't take back. His thumbs moved before his brain could overrule them. Donnie, I know. I don't care. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. He watched the stage where Betty had gone perfectly still, her phone in her hand, her expression unreadable from this distance. The presenter droned on about synergy and optimization. Betty, the closing gala is tonight. Donnie, I know. Betty, 300 people will be watching. Donnie, I know that too. A long pause. Betty, okay. That single word felt like jumping off a cliff. The closing gala transformed the oceanfront terrace into something from a magazine, string lights and white flowers and a jazz quartet playing standards that everyone pretended to appreciate. Sophia was upstairs with the resort childcare, probably teaching the other kids her sandcastle techniques. Donnie had worn his best shirt, the one he'd been saving, and felt the weight of every borrowed dollar that made this trip possible. Betty stood across the terrace surrounded by executives, looking untouchable in a navy dress that probably cost more than his monthly salary. She laughed at something a board member said, playing her role perfectly. Their eyes met across the crowd. Donnie set down his drink and started walking. He felt the moment people noticed, the subtle shift in conversation, heads turning, watching the analyst in the off-the-rack shirt cutting through the executive tier like he belonged there. Marcus Caldwell's expression went from confused to hostile. A VP from operations whispered something to her companion. Donnie didn't stop. He walked straight to Betty Briones, his CEO, the woman who held his career in her hands, and said clearly enough for the nearby circle to hear, "Would you like to dance?" The terrace went quiet. Not silent, the music still played, conversations continued at the edges, but in their immediate orbit, everything stopped. Betty's executive team froze mid-sentence. Someone's champagne glass paused halfway to their lips. Betty looked at him with an expression he couldn't read. This was her out. She could laugh it off, make it seem like a charming mistake, preserve the corporate distance that protected them both. Instead, she smiled. I'd love to. She placed her hand in his, and the whispers started immediately. The jazz quartet was playing something slow and old-fashioned. Donnie pulled Betty close, not inappropriately, but unmistakably intimate, and they swayed together while 300 pairs of eyes watched them cross a line that couldn't be uncrossed. You know this changes everything, Betty murmured against his shoulder. Good. My board will ask questions. HR will have concerns. People will talk. Let them. She pulled back enough to look at him, her eyes searching his face. You could lose your job. I could lose my credibility. This is reckless and impulsive, Anne. And I don't care. He said it firmly, so she could hear the certainty. I spent 3 years being invisible. Playing it safe. Choosing security over everything else. But you know what? I'm tired of being scared. Donnie. I see you, Betty. Not your money or your company or your corner office. I see you. The woman who teaches 8-year-olds about marine biology. Who sits on beaches at midnight talking about childhood dreams. Who's brilliant and lonely and brave enough to admit it. He tightened his hold on her waist. So yeah, this is dangerous. But you're worth the risk. Betty's eyes were bright, almost teary. Around them, the whispers had crescendoed to open staring. Marcus Caldwell looked apoplectic. A cluster of VPs watched with expressions ranging from shock to fascination. I haven't danced with someone in 5 years, Betty confessed quietly. How am I doing? Dangerously well. She leaned her forehead against his, and the gesture was so intimate, so public, that it stole his breath. What are we doing? Something reckless, Donnie said. Something real. The song ended. They stood together for one more heartbeat, neither willing to let go first. Then Betty stepped back, but kept his hand in hers, and led him off the dance floor with her head high and her spine straight, making a statement, making a choice. Behind them, the whispers turned to wildfire. The first week back felt like living in 2 worlds simultaneously. By day, Donnie was the analyst in cubicle 247, running projections and attending team meetings and pretending the ground beneath him hadn't shifted. By night, after Sophia fell asleep clutching her collection of Mariposa Beach shells, he'd text Betty and feel 17 again. Betty, still awake? Donnie, always. You. Betty, reading acquisition proposals. Riveting stuff. Tell me something real. Donnie, Sophia asked today if you liked dinosaurs. Apparently, that's her metric for good people. Betty, smart kid. What did you tell her? Donnie, that I'd find out. Betty, Triceratops. Obviously. They met for lunch on Thursday at a cafe 3 miles from the office, far enough to feel safe. Betty wore jeans and a baseball cap, trying for anonymity. It almost worked until she ordered a $15 salad without looking at the price, and Donnie remembered exactly who she was. This feels very clandestine, Betty said, amused. That's because it is. Donnie glanced around the cafe, half expecting Marcus Caldwell to materialize with a camera. Your board member has been asking questions. I heard through the grapevine. Betty's expression hardened. Marcus asks questions about everything. It's his job to be paranoid. Is it paranoid if he's right? We're not doing anything wrong. Aren't we? Donnie kept his voice low. You're my CEO. There are policies. Power dynamics. HR would have a field day. Betty set down her fork with deliberate care. Do you want to stop? The question hung between them, weighted with everything they weren't saying. No, Donnie admitted. I really don't. Then we'll be careful. She reached across the table, her fingers brushing his. I didn't get where I am by letting other people dictate my choices. On Saturday, Betty came to his apartment for the first time. Donnie had spent 2 hours cleaning, trying to make his modest space look less modest. Sophia had created a welcome banner that said, Welcome Betty, in purple crayon and hung it crooked across the living room. Betty stood in the doorway, taking it all in, the second-hand couch, the mismatched dishes visible through the kitchen pass-through, Sophia's explosion of artwork covering every available surface. Her penthouse probably costs more per month than this entire building. It's small, Donnie said, suddenly self-conscious. It's perfect. Betty walked to the refrigerator, examining Sophia's gallery of construction paper masterpieces. A dinosaur family. A beach scene with 3 stick figures. A house with hearts floating around it. This is what a home looks like. Betty. She turned to him, her eyes bright. My penthouse has original art worth 6 figures. Museum-quality pieces I bought because my decorator said they were good investments. Her voice cracked slightly. But I'd trade all of it for this. For Sophia's drawings and your second-hand furniture and the feeling that people actually live here. Donnie crossed to her, pulling her close. You could live here. If you wanted. In your 1-bedroom apartment with the leaky faucet. I'd fix the faucet. She laughed against his chest, and the sound was so genuine it hurt. This is worth more than anything I've built. They spent the afternoon teaching Sophia to make cookies, flour everywhere, and Betty's designer jeans covered in chocolate chips. She looked more relaxed than Donnie had ever seen her, laughing when Sophia declared her pretty good at stirring for a boss lady. That night, after Betty left and Sophia was asleep, Donnie's phone buzzed with an email from HR. Ethics inquiry, mandatory meeting Monday 9 a.m. His stomach dropped. Betty, I just got the same email. Don't panic. Donnie, easy for you to say. You're not the expendable one. Betty, you're not expendable to me. Donnie, Betty, if they make you choose between the company and me. Betty, I won't have to. I'll handle this. But Sunday afternoon, Marcus Caldwell sent a company-wide email about maintaining professional boundaries and protecting shareholder interests. The subtext was clear. Betty called him at midnight, her voice tight. Marcus is calling an emergency board meeting. He has witnesses from the gala. Anonymous complaints about favoritism. So it's over. Donnie felt numb saying it. No. Her voice turned to steel. It's just beginning. Trust me, Donnie. I didn't build this company by backing down. But lying awake in the darkness, listening to Sophia's gentle snoring, Donnie wondered what trust was worth when the whole world was against them. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for Tuesday at 2 p.m., which gave Donnie exactly 36 hours to imagine every worst-case scenario. He sat at his desk pretending to work while his entire professional life hung in the balance, watching the clock tick toward his execution. Betty texted once, "Don't come to the office tomorrow. Stay with Sophia. I've got this." He wanted to believe her. But Marcus Caldwell had spent 20 years protecting shareholder interests with ruthless efficiency, and Donnie was an expendable analyst who'd committed the cardinal sin of sleeping with the CEO. Except they hadn't slept together. They'd held hands on a beach and danced at a gala and fallen in love in the most inconvenient way possible. Tuesday morning, Sophia made him pancakes, lumpy, slightly burned, perfect. Are you sad, Daddy? Just thinking about work stuff, baby. Is it because of Betty? The kids at school said their parents think you're gonna get fired for having a girlfriend who's your boss. Donnie's heart cracked. What did you tell them? That Betty's nice and makes you smile, and that's what matters. Sophia climbed into his lap, 8 years old and fiercely loyal. If they fire you, we'll be okay. We're always okay. He held her tight, breathing in her shampoo-scented hair, and tried to believe it. Betty stood at the head of the conference table, facing 12 board members who looked at her with varying degrees of concern and hostility. Marcus sat at the far end, his expression triumphant, a manila folder thick with evidence positioned in front of him. Let's get to it, Betty said crisply. Marcus called this meeting. I assume he has something to present. Marcus opened his folder with theatrical precision. I have testimony from 17 employees who witnessed the CEO engaging in a romantic relationship with a subordinate analyst at the Mariposa Summit. Photographs of them dancing intimately at the closing gala. Documentation of policy violations regarding fraternization between executives and staff. He slid photos across the table. Betty and Donnie on the dance floor, her forehead against his, both of them looking at each other like the rest of the world didn't exist. Additionally, Marcus continued, I have evidence of preferential treatment. Mr. Davis was invited to an executive tier event due to what we initially believed was a database error. I now believe it was deliberate manipulation to facilitate this inappropriate relationship. That's a serious accusation, the CFO said carefully. It's also completely false, Betty replied. The database error was legitimate and corrected immediately. Donnie Davis attended because I approved all mid-level managers for inclusion after the error was discovered. 6 other analysts attended the same summit. But you didn't dance with them, Marcus shot back. You didn't spend private time with them. You chose one specific employee for romantic pursuit, creating a textbook case of sexual harassment based on power imbalance. Harassment requires unwelcome advances. Betty's voice was ice. I can assure you, nothing about our relationship is unwelcome. That's irrelevant. The power dynamic makes consent impossible. Marcus leaned forward. As fiduciaries, we have a responsibility to protect this company from liability. I'm calling for the immediate termination of Donnie Davis and a formal censure of the CEO for ethical violations. Silence fell across the room. This was the moment. Betty could end it here, apologize, claim a temporary lapse in judgment, sacrifice Donnie to save her position. The board would accept it. Marcus would be satisfied. Everything could return to normal. But normal meant loneliness. Normal meant empire building at the cost of everything that made life worth living. No, Betty said clearly. Marcus blinked. Excuse me. I said no. We're not terminating Donnie Davis. We're promoting him. The room erupted. Have you lost your mind? Marcus demanded. Quite the opposite. Betty pulled out her own folder, distributing copies around the table. What I'm proposing is a complete organizational restructuring that eliminates the conflict of interest while recognizing exceptional talent we've been underutilizing. She walked them through it methodically, a new strategic analytics division reporting directly to the COO, completely separate from her reporting chain. Donnie would be VP of the division, leading a team focused on predictive modeling and risk assessment. His work has saved this company millions, Betty said firmly. His supply chain analysis prevented a disastrous expansion. His market penetration model is being used across 3 divisions. He's been doing VP-level work at analyst pay because we didn't look closely enough. This is absurd, Marcus interjected. You're creating an entire division to justify a relationship. I'm creating an entire division because we need it, and he's the best person to run it. If you can't see his value, you're not looking closely enough. Betty met each board member's eyes. I'm not asking permission to date Donnie Davis. I'm informing you that I am, and I've restructured to ensure no ethical violations exist. The question is whether this board trusts my judgment on business decisions. The CFO studied the proposal. The division makes sense operationally. We've been discussing predictive analytics expansion for 2 quarters. But the optics, another board member started. The optics, Betty interrupted, are that I found someone who makes me happy and promoted someone who deserves it. If those 2 facts happen to be the same person, that's not a scandal. That's life. Marcus stood abruptly. If this passes, I'm resigning. I won't be party to this corporate soap opera. That's your choice, Betty said calmly. The vote was 7-5 in favor. Marcus gathered his papers and walked out without another word. Donnie's phone rang at 4:30. It's done, Betty said. She sounded exhausted and exhilarated. You're VP of Strategic Analytics. New division. Report to the COO. Start Monday. He couldn't speak. Donnie. You just restructured your entire company for me. I restructured my entire company because it was the right business decision. Her voice softened. The fact that it also means I get to keep you is just excellent strategic planning. He laughed, the sound breaking with relief. I love you. The line went quiet. Say that again, Betty whispered. I love you. Come to my office. Now. It's 4:30 on a Tuesday. Sophia gets out of school. Bring Sophia. When they arrived 20 minutes later, breathless from rushing, Betty was waiting in her lobby. She dropped to Sophia's level first, making eye contact with his daughter. Sophia, I have something important to ask you. Is it okay if I date your dad? Like, officially? In a way where I come to dinner and we spend weekends together and I'm around a lot. Sophia looked at her seriously. Will you still teach me about ocean stuff? Obviously. And you won't make my dad sad. I'll try very hard not to. Sophia nodded. Okay then. But you should know I'm a package deal. If you date him, you get me too. Betty's eyes went bright. That's the best deal I've ever been offered. She stood and looked at Donnie, and everything they'd risked, everything they'd fought for, everything they'd chosen despite the impossible odds, it was all there in her expression. So, Betty said. Should we go tell HR that the CEO is dating a VP from a completely different division and there's nothing they can do about it? Donnie pulled her close, Sophia's hand in his, and kissed her in the middle of the executive lobby while startled employees pretended not to stare. Let's go build something, he said. And they did.